Secretary Craxi, Professor Pugliese, and Ambassador Guagliano. Thank you for hosting this workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that one of the most dangerous places to be is between a person and their lunch, so I'll be very brief. The main points, and this is why we're very happy to be part of this discussion. We were asked, of course, to reflect on the experiences and models. IFAD is the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We are at the same time a funding agency in IFI, International Funding Institution, and we are also part of the United Nations. It's very good for us to share our experience every now and then. We mainly work in the field, and I think for all the calls for what are we going to do next, we humbly want to present some of our lessons. Basically, I will go very fast. I will leave the presentation, and certainly it seems to me this is just the beginning of a road, and we'll be very happy to continue with you. Our mandate is on the rural smallholders, the small farmers, and the rural areas. I want to specify this because I think many times when we talk about small and medium enterprises, we think mainly of cities. This is where there is the agitation. This is where there are the present trouble. But actually, if you dig a little bit deeper, we see that a lot of the people in the urban areas that are maybe causing the problem, but certainly part of the unemployed, actually came from somewhere, which is the rural areas. So let us concentrate a bit more on the rural areas. In my department, which is the Near East, North Africa, and Europe division, you can see that already we are kind of circling the Mediterranean, at least the developing countries. And some of the lessons there that we have learned have actually been quite interesting and quite relevant to the small and medium enterprises. Where we focus a lot of our work is on natural resources, is on agricultural production and productivity, overall community-based rural development, income generation, rural financial services, and an emerging demand for territorial approaches. I have highlighted here where we, anyway, in practice, have to use instruments that will have the private sector. But that's the second important point. The first one was, let's think of the rural sectors, not only urban, but because there is a large potential. The second point I want to make and to highlight is on private-public partnerships. We have experiences that show that some of what was said earlier about the capacity building and things like that, it cannot all be done through equity financing or very competitive private financing. And this is where we find that some of the best successes we have had have involved what is known here as PPP, the private-public partnerships. At IFAD, in my department, what we usually aim for, or on average, we have investments in specific countries that with the co-financing, it's about one-to-one co-financing. We have about $250 million per year that are invested purely in agriculture and the rural areas. So it seems to me, and that will be one of the points I will make in concluding, that one role we could play, whether it's this fund, other funds, any initiatives, is that we are anyway investing these funds. Let us see how we can invest together. We have been in touch with the Union for the Mediterranean. As you know, agriculture was not one of the priorities. We are hoping that once there is a new impetus to the work of the Union for the Mediterranean, we have been asked to play a role on the agriculture side. Now, any private investment needs some kind of policy, strategy, framework. We have been working with our partners in developing this strategy for food security. As was said before, the agricultural countries are the group of countries that are the most vulnerable to food prices because we import the largest proportion of the food, and there's a three-pronged strategy that is being implemented at this point. And on agriculture, it counts on agriculture increases in production. We will never reach full food security and full self-sufficiency, but certainly there is a potential for investments, and this is not only public, it's private also. Because one of the main points is that we have experienced over the last few years a lot of discrepancy between investments in urban areas and rural areas. So what at this point we would like to offer to the discussion going on, we of course as a UN agency are probably going to be the last ones to tell you whether to go with this fund or another, but certainly we can contribute to the thinking. We ourselves are a fund that was formed through ideas like this in the 70s, and as one of the responses to the food price crisis, the first one, we're very generously hosted by the government of Italy. We function, but certainly we do need administration and others. But, so certainly from our side, we would like to contribute what we know about forming a fund, but also about the mechanism of having private sector and private-public partnership. We certainly can offer our own funds as co-financing. And here I wanted to take, which brings me to the third point of additionality and specificity in the middle-income country-specific problems, as was mentioned before. Where we have issues, I mean, there is a need, and before I think many have said about how little goes to small and medium enterprises. There is certainly a large need, but it's all the transaction costs that are an issue. One of these transaction costs is when it's the government that is a kind of an intermediary. And certainly by you going to the private sector, unless there is someone who takes over some of this capacity building and the other costs of making sure that the private investment is going to work, governments in general are reluctant to play that role because they would rather invest in infrastructure and in other things. My suggestion there then would be that at least part of these funds would be to decrease the cost of the public sector that is supposed to do the capacity building and others. So not necessarily that it has to be done by the public sector, but it's the public goods part. That part of the funding would go to making that lending or that loan to the government a bit less expensive. The additionality issue is, of course, as you know, all the funds that you have previously formed rely on your funding. And I think we had, for example, a good presentation from Spain. We now have a very good arrangement on using some of those funds from Spain as co-financing to our projects. So the question that is always raised in the developing countries is this in addition, or is it going to go from somewhere else? And certainly we would be very interested in working with you on this one. And finally, we will certainly be very happy to share all of our knowledge on what works in the private-public partnerships and in promoting small and medium enterprises as you have done. So we look forward to the continuation of the discussion and to playing a role